Hello everyone, welcome to my video where we are going to talk about how we can integrate the Java Spring Boot plus the configuration file. So before moving on forward, let me tell you why we are doing the configuration file or why we are configuring the file. Actually, what happens is when we are deploying a Java project or application, and if there is a change in the configuration of some files or a microservice, we need to redeploy it. So coming up with a solution, if we have a configuration file set up centralized in another repo or another folder, where even though we make any changes, we don't need to redeploy things. So there we come where we have the configuration repo, or we can say we can configure the file from Git configuration. So today we will be talking about how to set up those configuration file. Let's move step by step. But before moving ahead, let me tell you how we can configure the Git. First of all, there are two ways to configure Git. Like you can use username and password. But in this project, we will be using some different kind of configuration or to connect with the GitHub. We will be using SSH. So how we'll be configuring the SSH or how we'll be connecting GitHub through SSH. So first of all, we need to go and look at into the file. So when once we come to the folder, we need to go to the terminal and we need to have a private and public key. So what does private and public key stands for? Here, private and public key stands for is like the GitHub will have the access of your public key and you will have the private key. You can use your private key to connect with the GitHub. So in order to create the private and public key, we need to run this command where we can type SSH and keygen minus T ed25519. Remember, ed25519 is the type of encryption. So we'll be using ed25519 and your GitHub email ID, and then we will be storing it in a configuration file. You must know that we need to have a file, right? So, and minus n stand for no parsing, face parsing. So after running this command on the Git terminal, we'll have two files in our folder. We'll have this folder where we will have the private key, and second we'll have this public key in extension of .pub. Now, after getting the private and public key, the foremost work we should do is we need to encrypt or we need to encrypt the private key so that nobody else could look into it. So, in order to encrypt the private key, we need to do some read and write changes, which we can do it chmod 600 and the file path, right? This file path. So if we do this, what will happen is the owner will have the read and write permission to the file, but not the others. So after this, when we have the encryption, the private key, or you can say security, now we need to add the public key to the GitHub. Now let me tell you how we can add things on GitHub. Once we move on to GitHub, we need to go to the profile settings. Now, after clicking on settings, we need to go on the SSH and GPS keys, where we can have one new SSH key here. Now you can see I have this config server deploy key here itself because I was doing I was working on my project. So here what you have to do, you have to click on the new SSH key. Now after this, you need to put the public key inside the key part and any title you can give of your own. So now what we have to do after now once you add the SSH key, now you are good to go to connect to the GitHub. Now like you need to have the known host. Now you will say why to have a known host? Let's say if there is a something type of attack where they mimic as of GitHub, how will you know that you are connecting to the GitHub? So the known host will have the GitHub fingerprint where whenever you are going to connect to the GitHub, they will make sure that the path or the person who the things from which you are connecting is the right. That so after this, once you have a known host, you can have the testing SSH. Yes, you need to test whether you are connected to the GitHub or not. By following this command, you will find a message coming like you are authenticated. Now, after this, the next step which we have is to create a GitHub folder or repository. Now, once you have the SSH key, now you can be connected. Now you are connected with the GitHub. Now you can access any of your private repository as well. So once you go to the repository, you will have to create one private config repo. Once you go inside, you can see there are many microservices configuration files. Yes. Now after this, what you need to do is once you have created this config repo, once you have created this config repo, now you need to go to your main file where you have created your backend part. Now you need to create the config server Maven. Now you can create the Maven project by simply clicking on Command Shift and P. This will help you to create the Java project. Now after creating the Java project, let's not go into the creation of the Java project. There are multiple videos on the Java project making of Maven. So now I will tell you what all dependencies you need to install. There are two dependencies you need to install. That is config server and the starter web. So there is one more thing. We can have a security as well so that whenever we are connecting to this config server, we need to give the username and password. But for this project, I haven't given the username or password. So to make it simple, let's go on with that. Now, after this, when we have this POM file, the dependency, we need to go to the main Java and this config server application, and we need to add a annotation that will automatically help you to configure the config server. By enabling the config server, now you need to go to the resource and the application.properties where you will find this server.port. Server.port is necessary for all the microservices as well as for the config server. You need to also give application.name to every microservice in order to connect to your specific configuration file. Now you have to give the GitHub UI where you will have the you need to connect with. You need to clone the GitHub repo. Now this part of section, this property tells you by default its name is main. So if you have different kind of name where we I have master or any kind of name, you can specify so that it does not create a trouble while connecting to the config repo. Now you need to have ignore local SSH settings, and by the way, you need to have the private key. So in my system, there was a problem where I couldn't be connecting with the like directly through the keys which is in folder itself or in the file which I have saved. So in one of the websites, I got to know how to connect the private key without the file connecting. So after this, when you are connected, so this file you have to make it true in order to whenever it starts, you need to clone on start. So yeah. After this, what you need to do is you are these all configurations you need to do in the config server. Now, we need to do in the microservices part. Now, once your config server is ready, you will see this kind of website where you can particularly go to the module. Now, let me tell you that the configuration server can be of different type. Now in configuration, we can make it of production, we can make it of test, we can make it of development. So here we have a default. Why we have a default? Because when we go here in the files, you can see there are cart model.yml. Now in order to have a development file, then model dash dev dot yml. So this type of configuration will only connected when you are connected to the development part, when you are asking for the development. And in the microservices, you need to specify in the uh, resource. Well, we go to the application.property, we need to have this application name, and also we need to specify which type of development we are going to connect with. Either we are going to connect with the default. If we don't specify anything, we will be connecting the default. Otherwise, we need to specify, is it a profile of dev, or it is a profile of test, or it is a profile of some other kind. So one microservice can connect to multiple configuration files. As you can see here, we have an application.yml. In application.yml will be common to all each and every microservice which it is connected with. So what we need to do in the microservices part now, we need to add dependency in the microservice. There are three types of dependency we need to add. One of them is the starter config, then second is the starter bootstrap, and third is the starter accurator. Will help you to refresh things without redeployment of the microservices. So after adding these dependencies, we need to go to the application.properties where need to specify these URIs and import. And once you have completed these things, you are good to go and you are good to connect with the configuration server. As you can see here, there is a medium. You can go for the Spring Cloud config where it is thoroughly defined and told how to connect with the configuration server, and these are the URL you can have. For instance, we are connected to slash product model slash default, so we can connect although in different ways. So it this is defined in the doc itself. So this is all, guys. This is how you can connect your Java Spring Boot to the configuration server, and you can easily deploy, and you don't need to redeploy your application. Thank you.